There you go. I think let's get things underway here. Fully acknowledging people. It's Monday morning. People are signing on and joining us, but I think just to be cognizant of time and make sure Chris and Beyond Trust has the space they need to share all the amazing information with us, we're going to get things going. So first off, just want to say welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Today is our security and SIP event kickoff, and we get to kick this off with Beyond Trust. We're extremely excited about that. One of the things here, if you look here, just a quick little overview. This is the first in a five-part series, so they'll span over the next coming few weeks. We are extremely excited to have you on board with us. This is the first time for me tackling an event such as this in this specific layout, so extremely curious to see how it works out and spend some time with people. Now, there was an information kit that was shared with you from our events marketing team. If you have any questions, however, feel free to respond to events@cdw.ca. You can just in the header, if you put security and SIP event, then that will go straight to Mackenzie Appa and team, and they can assist you as well. Or also feel free to reach out to your account executive, and they can help make sure that we get any questions you may have answered, either about the event, for anything product or partners related, myself or your account executive as well. So without further ado, we're gonna kick things off here. So I want to take a quick moment this morning just to briefly touch on CDW here. I promise we'll keep it light because I really want to get to the good stuff with Beyond Trust. But it's really important for me just to show that, CDW is an established IT services provider. We now have reach globally. The majority of our expertise and our delivery teams are still focused around Canada, US, and the UK, but we have a number of operations, or a number of offices, and a number of teams that expand our capability nationally. But for the audience today, the main focus here, needless to say, Toronto and Canada. So with that, when we look at the Great White North for CDW Canada here, just a rough, give you an idea of order of magnitude. CDW Canada is just over 900 co-workers today. We have 9 offices spanning the country, and sort of the running joke has become is pretty much everywhere where there's a NHL team, and then there's a few cities that we like to tease about it. But the reality is, if you look everywhere from Victoria over to Montreal, and then we have individual reps out on the Eastern Seaboard, but physical office locations is distributed as that. So about 290 ITS coworkers. So for us, this is the division that really is your engineering and your technology front-ending teams. So it's like a very strong bench, and about 1.2 billion in revenue. So just we are extremely proud to be part of this family. We get to see and reach a lot of people and organizations, and that allows us to help out our customers. So, but we're here to talk about Beyond Trust today, and that specifically sits within the CDW security portfolio. So we're going to quickly just do an overview here. This is a brand that I think is new for a lot of, actually, I'm going to step back for a second. This is a brand element that is new for a lot of organizations. I think our counterpart in the US and the UK has had a little bit of a head start on us on establishing this brand. But recently I joined CDW through the acquisition of a company called Scalar, and we are extremely excited about the joint capabilities that this has brought and folding our professional services and managed services teams into the fold. And so one of the great things about these events now is having the backing of the large organization, but still the ability to do very specialized and specific work, and to really help customers solve complex problems. One of the neat things that we get to do as well as part of the security highlight is we do an annual security study. And so this year was our 6th security study, and we publish the reports out, and your account executives can share this with you, where we are also more than happy to share a version of the one layer process of the raw data for your own internal use. But the big thing about the study for us is it focuses on Canadian organizations. We found a lot of good information about global, North America as a whole, but let's face it, the Great White North is a little bit different. And so we wanted to get accurate representation for us on this. So just as a quick highlight, from that study there, and this is why security with our partners are so important to us. the cost of compromises continues to be really high, and we give a range there. But the reality is one of the biggest changes we saw from last year to this year is the speed of remediation. And so just like organizations are starting to realize that, and as the environments get more complex, it's taking longer to remediate from attacks. And then if you look at the number of attacks organizations experienced, significant number there. We also like to break it down as a cost per user here, because a lot of times we'll have customers on the line and it just, $5.7 million doesn't necessarily equate. So what we want to do here is we break it down to a per employee cost for the breach. So, you can do some quick mental math in the back of your head and figure out how you fit within that portfolio. And then we have 81% of organizations reports being affected by repeat ransomware. And we found this incredible because it means not only are they struggling once to actually stop the ransomware and clean it up, but without, in a lot of cases, finding the true root cause is really difficult. And so 81% of the organizations that suffered ransomware then actually suffers a reinfection. And then the other really interesting data point that stood out for us, and I don't think this surprises anyone, is that 82% of organizations indicated some sort of security incident due to a partner or a third party. And this is critical for us. This ties back into our identity messaging and how do we put technical controls in place around allowing people in, and that's where Beyond Trust plays such a significant role for us. Today's security landscape, I think, rapidly changing at the top there is more prominent than ever with all the work from home and how the traditionally just how the market has shifted both on us and our customers and what we're dealing with. So that is really the one that I wanted to highlight out of here. That's very, very key for us for today. And then just sort of the one that drives out of that is traditional countermeasures are not always proving effective, or at least how we're using traditional countermeasures. So just applying that thought and making sure that we position things correctly is key for us. So CDW security within the team, as we deconstruct a little bit further here in North America, we have over 100 dedicated security professionals. These are people that you'll see a small sample of certifications on the side there, but it's really people that are certified and usually has long tenures, like 10, 15 years plus in the security realm and industry. So they understand business challenges and where people are coming from. And then we also have a security operations center that can help you with managing your security solutions. Some of the customers on today are actual managed services customers, but also if you are not today and this is something of interest, again, something we'd be more than happy to assist with. The approach when you work with us here at CDW, you'll see for the security specifically, we focus on prepare, defend, respond, very loosely modeled around a NIST 800 framework to sort of guide you through the life cycle of a security program. We also use this on a micro scale on our services where we just believe we need to drive at the business focus first and understand what the business problems is you're solving. Otherwise, implementing the technology becomes challenging, and ensuring that you see the return on investment and the actual value and it improves your security posture in a corresponding manner is not. Becomes very challenging if we don't understand what the proper business need, risk, or problem is that we're addressing. And then the response phase for us can take two forms, either like we mentioned in a managed service that will assist customers, or we can do like a turnkey training, build a solution or fine tune a solution and train customers to make sure that they're comfortable running the solutions to the maximum efficiency. One of the pillars of that prepare is a risk advisory overview. This is especially relevant for us with a partner such as Beyond Trust. Just there's so much of the product there that we can drive out of understanding and working with customers to make sure around identity access management, remote access, privilege access management. A lot of those solutions are based on making sure you have a solid understanding of how the business needs to approach that technology. And so one of the big things that we drive here from CDW side is this what we call risk advisory overview, which is really a combination of GRC and pen testing capabilities. And so we'll look at us doing assessments with organizations to understand where they are and how things are set up and help them build a roadmap. We'll look at the different control frameworks that we can leverage to lay out this roadmap, or in some cases that's mandated to our customers to adhere to or be compliant with. And out of that, we can then perform strategic consulting and drive a business a continuous service improvement process if needed, or at least set organizations up to maintain the work and the good that they've done in the first three steps there. CDW security portfolio over. Needless to say, I'm not going to walk you through this. It's too early on any kind of day, but the reality is what I wanted to just demonstrate here is there's a lot of capability and expertise We will be sharing these decks with you, so feel free to browse through here. If there's anything that pops out or stands out specifically, this is the kind of thing that you can reach out and talk to us. Very, very excited whenever we can help an organization solve a business problem. From our operations perspective, 24/7 by 365, we have a network and security operations centers both here and in Calgary, and also a local off-site DR plan in Toronto itself. All the stock, like we're SOC 2, PCI, NIST certified. So really, we list this here. It's just important for us that you know that we've gone through and done our homework and we're prepped. We also have protected B status. So one of the great things is when you work with us, that sort of a lot of the protected B controls filters through for yet another layer of security layered on. About 20 plus security operations folks that are cycled on a 24/7 365 model, and about 40 plus network operations. This has actually grown quite a bit in the last little while, but as of the creation of this slide, this is where we were. And then we also have a team of about 12 people that focuses on cyber testing and vulnerability testing specifically. So anything that we can do to help. Now, without further ado, I want to just talk maybe briefly just about our history with trust. So for us, originally, the relationship started, if you rewind your way back, all the way to Avecto, and we originally picked up the partnership as part of an endpoint strategy for privileged access management. But in a little bit, Chris will talk to you also about the evolution of the organizations. And over the last few years, we've seen a massive change from that stage to where the new partnership has grown into a full partnership with Beyond Trust and all the elements that layers in and that's relevant and important for us there. One of the things that really excites us about the Beyond Trust as a partner, and that please, like when we get into throughout the question sections, I'll touch on that in a moment, but make sure you ask Chris the questions you want, or if there's things that piques your curiosity. But it's a very complete solution, and we got to join them in California in February of this year, right before COVID started shutting things down. We actually got to join the partner conference there and to see the roadmap and how they envision the future and their strategy. And that was really, really exciting to us as an organization. So extremely excited to have Beyond Trust with us here today. And at this stage, just a quick few notes before I hand it off to Chris. Questions, participants, as you'll notice that you're muted. So for questions, please, you feel free to use your chat function there. I will be keeping an eye on that. Chris and I will answer live. There is an actual question period towards the end too, but Chris and I both like a little bit more of a interactive format, so feel free to drop questions in there. We're going to be spending a lot of time with each other over the next few weeks, so I'm hoping that we can get you comfortable to asking questions and participating and making sure that ultimately you get out of this the information that you really need and you're looking for. So at that stage, I'm gonna hand over to Chris. Chris Heels is from Beyond Trust here joining us today. Chris has more than 15 years of an experience in this field. Chris also is a military veteran from the United States Navy and worked on a number of sensitive projects. And so, again, he gets security. He's with us. He has a deep background in this. And today he consults on BAM implementations and reports into the office of the CTO as acting deputy CTO with Beyond Trust. And so you're in good hands. Please welcome Chris. And Chris, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Theo. Appreciate it. Mackenzie, do you want to go ahead and swap the presenter? Make sure I can share my deck here. Let's get into the beginning. Awesome. There we go. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. As Theo said, want to make this as interactive as possible. Please don't wait to ask questions till the end. We'll take some time throughout and try to answer them and kind of go about it. This is a great opportunity for us. And once again, thank you, CDW. Thank you, Mackenzie and Theo, for putting this together and inviting us to come and kind of share this. Obviously, given the current circumstances with COVID and everything that's going on, I mean, there's so many different angles to actually approach privileged access management. This is just one of them, but we could literally spend a half a day or more talking about all the different pieces. But without that, further ado, one of the things that, and Theo kind of you led into it, one of the things that I always like to cover at the beginning of a webinar to kind of, at least buy some trust, if you will, is, what qualifies me? And you kind of touched on that. I did 9 years in the Navy, the U.S. Navy. When I got out of the U.S. Navy, I actually put myself, finished my college degree, and actually went straight to working with. I'm located here in Phoenix, Arizona area, and I worked with the Arizona Department of Health Services bioterrorism program. So I worked on their MedSys program as a system administrator, as my first real big gig, if you will, related to IT. That led into other opportunities working with a lot of local state agencies because we kind of knew the ins and outs, how the whole system worked. It is a unique system working with, state government, state and local government. From there, I branched out and, did some mom and pop one-stop shop type deal, everything soup to nuts, and then found myself with the 2010 Lockheed Martin census. Worked a stint with that. Obviously that's not a, lifelong career, but just kind of dibbled and dabbled in a few other software companies and whatnot. And then my last major big tenure, if you will, that kind of introduced me into the realm of PAM was at Charles Schwab, for those of you that are familiar with the financial securities institution, for trading and banking and everything else. And from there, my background is Active Directory. So, I joined there as part of the Active Directory team. Within 6 months, I literally found myself at the head of privileged access management. Not only the direction, the strategy, the maturity. So I spent about 9 years at Schwab maturing the overall PAM footprint as we know it today, or as they knew it today, with their maturity, going through several different products, both legacy products, both products that are in the industry today as solutions, and ended up finding ourselves with Beyond Trust. And that's truly where the relationship that I made with them, spent about 2.5 years working with them. And to be completely honest with you, fell in love with the company. Everybody that I worked with, the partnership was really something that I valued. And so after about 2.5 years, I decided it was time to make that shift and make that change. I came over to Beyond Trust a little over a year ago and found myself as part of the pre-sales engineering team. Obviously, having a bunch of background, that helped. And what I found out is I found myself working as more as a liaison, helping customers that were either troubled, didn't know where to start, didn't know how to start, didn't know how to tackle PAM. And so I spent more time bridging those gaps and helping customers than I did actually as a pre-sales engineer working towards a commission. So we made the shift to the deputy CTO position. And so now I find myself really enabling not only our partners, but our partners' customers, our customers, and helping kind of bridge those gaps. So that kind of gives you an idea, background about myself, where I came from. And so again, without further ado, we're going to talk about, the how to enable and secure a remote workforce. So let's just jump into it, right? So ideally, the agenda, we're going to talk about, the impact. I don't want to harp too much on, we all know what's going on in the world with COVID and how it's affecting everybody. But ideally, that's the basis for all of us essentially working remotely. And a lot of what this focuses on is the considerations and some of the bigger picture items that maybe we didn't think about when we started, enabling this remote workforce. We'll talk about the surge and the IT help desk. We'll talk about the bigger picture of VPNs that, once again, I think a lot of people, when they think, hey, I need access to my company resources, instantly they go to VPN. So we're going to talk about some of the considerations with that. And then obviously the dreaded cyber hygiene, right? It's funny, we talk about passwords are like germs and they multiply. We write them down, we add numbers to the end. So we'll talk about that. And then at the very end, we'll kind of wrap it up and talk about, the winning recipe, what encompasses all of these pieces. So, the impact of COVID, obviously, for those of us in cybersecurity, we all know the IT departments are under essentially incredible pressure to, once again, continue business productivity for now the expanded remote workforce, right? And we've grown that exponentially. And so ideally, we, as many of our, let's say, IT teams work overtime to enable these remote workers, maintaining security practices and compliance may not be essentially at the top of the list, right? But the threat actors are actively seeking these opportunities to benefit from essentially our current circumstances. So although enabling the remote workforce is typically a common practice, right? We do it in small increments as people come and go. Um, but now there's, essentially particular uh, urgent and unique security considerations that are being thrust upon these organizations and their employees as a result of the COVID crisis. And so, if we think about the attackers, they're obviously largely opportunistic. So they're seeking to exploit companies with essentially large attack surfaces, and they're doing that through outdated security policies or maybe reduced adherence to security practices as a result of the situation that we're in. So the idea behind this is it's not just the big companies, right? It's the small, the mediums, it's the state and local government organizations, it's everybody. Um, Everybody's getting hit as a result of this, malware outbreaks, ransomware attacks. And, history shows that, this is an even bigger now attack surface as a result of, what we've seen in the past prior to COVID. So now we're just, it's almost like we're kind of opening ourselves up even more to cybersecurity compromise. So ideally, our workforce is essentially we're being forced to go into this remote work phase, this telecommute, and we're being forced to do it in a very short window. Some organizations have been able to essentially provide employees with, let's say, company issue computers that they closely manage and they're able to lock down. But ideally, that's not often, reality. And so some of the things that, organizations, or maybe some of the things that might have happened in your organization, here's some considerations. Did you think about maybe, your company having to loosen up your BYOD or bring your own device policy? Maybe you've had to conduct personal business on your corporate laptop, such as helping your kids or homework, right? A lot of us, don't think about it at the time, but our kids had to go to a lot of our kids had to go to some type of virtual learning. And so you're trying to help them. Maybe you're trying to get their email, maybe you're trying to get a program. It's not working on their computer, so you try it on yours. Once again, being a corporate asset, now we're kind of mixing, personal versus business. Maybe your employees, maybe they had to use insecure, outdated remote access tools to connect to your company network. What about, your company using the always on VPNs for all user connections, even when some users, let's say, only need access to, let's say, cloud applications. Maybe your employees, are having issues or, opening, let's say, phishing emails with fake COVID news. It's a very real situation, and those are, obviously even more on the rise. Maybe your employees or colleagues downloaded some malicious software, introducing, let's say, malware into your corporate environment from home. Nevertheless, typically one or more of these examples probably has happened within your company, or could potentially happen in your company, and unfortunately it's just inevitable with today's circumstances. And so when we go and we look at this, we talk about, what's the question that you're typically asking yourself is, and it is, how can my organization enable workers with secure tools to maintain business continuity and avoid falling prey to cyber attacks, cybersecurity criminals, and security risks? And so the first step in this is the IT service desk, right? And so, ideally, are they equipped to handle the surge? It's funny because, don't get me wrong, I've had my own computer issues. I've had to reach out to our service desk, and mentally we think about service desk. Hey, we're calling the call center. We're going to get help. They're sitting there in the office. We're at home trying to work. And it's funny, I didn't come to that realization until I called my service desk. We did a video chat, and she's at home, working from home, helping me from home. And so it kind of made me think, oh wow, this is a much bigger picture. So now, instead of somebody being on the inside helping me remotely, now you have a help desk person working remotely, going through the network to help me remotely. And it's a much larger security consideration when you think about that. And so as a result, answering that question, are they equipped to handle this surge? And obviously this mandatory work from home and the policies, it's placing an immense amount of demands on IT infrastructure, especially when you talk about all of the different applications, the connections, and everything. And ideally, all of these employees or all of these telecommuters are turning to this remote workforce, and it's in high volume. And as a result, the major impact is affecting the service desk employees who are essentially trying to enable us, right, and support us while they're working from home also. So an effective remote support, tool essentially directly impacts the success of working remotely. And obviously the solutions that you use for this, they have to scale, they have to adapt, and they need to meet, rigorous security requirements while driving that productivity to enable that help desk person. And so when we look at the potential use cases, right, organizations need a secure remote access solution that can cover this long laundry list of use cases while making the entire service desk experience more efficient and more secure, right? So typically here's, I want to say, the common use cases that we've gathered from our customers. And, I ask you the question, can you relate to these needs? Do they apply to your organization? Ideally, we talk about the need to facilitate remote access for vendors and other third parties. We saw the slide that Theo talked about. We saw the statistics and the metrics. I mean, the statistics in most cases don't lie, right? And then we talk about the need to support devices on several platforms: Windows, Linux, Mac, iOS, Android, network, you name it, right? Got to support all those pieces. And then ideally we talk about, the need to remotely access those, whether it's servers, whether it's workstations, maybe it's unattended systems, maybe it's POS systems, who knows, wherever those systems are within your company or your organization. So ideally we talk about, supporting that wide range, and I already mentioned it, but, there's the mobile devices, the iOSs and the Android. Maybe we're talking about fixing off-network devices. Maybe it's robots, maybe it's machinery, maybe it's other devices that might not be connected to the internet that would typically be your, jump point into it. And again, when we talk about the need to maintain, we talk about routers, network devices, switches, all of this that provide that connectivity. So, during these challenging times, choosing the right remote support software is critical to the essentially productivity and security of your service desk. So let's talk about VPNs, right? And let's talk about the shortcomings of the VPNs. I believe we can all agree, for the most part, that offering some sort of remote access is non-negotiable. And this is essentially prior to, let's say COVID-19, that actually almost every network or every large organization that was, kind of a given. You join, if you have to work remotely, essentially they provide you some type of remote access. Employees need to be able to essentially access your systems from outside of your company firewall. However, remote access by its very nature creates exposure to cybersecurity risks. So to establish remote connections for employees, organizations often use the form of VPN, virtual private network. And that allows them to interact with their systems. But, VPNs work well when remote employees have corporate laptops, corporate, assets, as we like to refer to them. For employees that are connecting back, to corporate desktops from their personal laptop, or maybe their personal device, or maybe it's contractors or vendors who are connecting into your systems with their personal device, managing and securing VPNs now presents a big challenge. And so ideally, we talk about, have you considered these risks? One, excuse me, VPNs allow access to the network layer by providing more access than what's needed. Two, VPNs are difficult to maintain. Often they result in what we refer to as too much access and leftover access when hosts are removed or replaced. VPNs, the third piece here, sorry, VPNs enable an all or nothing access that essentially is always on. There's no granular level of access. Hackers typically need, days, maybe weeks to find what they're after. But if a hacker can obtain VPN access to your internal network from a exploited system, they can move around undetected using pivot techniques and essentially, continuing to prey on all of your assets or targets or your sensitive data. And ideally, hackers often target the remote workers, the external vendors. Uh, that's their bread and butter. Why? It's easier for them to target them rather than target large companies and try to directly attack them. Um, Ideally, personal devices. We touched on this at the beginning. The BYOD, the bring your own device laptops with access to VPNs. At the end of the day, they're just easier to crack for those hackers. And so another shortcoming, obviously we need to take in considerations is that most corporate VPN implementations, even used with corporate issued devices, are essentially not architected to support the entire company working remotely. When we think about smaller companies and smaller organizations and we go and, we get that internet connection, we typically have a set amount of bandwidth that we purchase for the size of company. For large companies and larger organizations, that becomes much bigger. We never really thought about, hey, now we're taking our entire workforce from an office space and we're going to send them home to work. We're going to give everybody a VPN connection and we're going to make everyone connect back. It doesn't scale that way. We're really stressing the parameters, if you will, of not only our home networks, but also our corporate networks for that type of connectivity. And so ideally VPN technologies, once again, it they lack one, rapid scalability. And when you have a significant number of employees or let's say even external workers that once again all of a sudden need that access, the solution may not perform to an acceptable level because it's having to now take what we might have considered maybe a 20% of our employees working remotely now to essentially 100%. Ideally VPNs, we kind of touched on this, they're dependent on the bandwidth available connecting the user's home, how much bandwidth the application requires, and VPNs are not typically configured to allow access to every single resource on your network. When someone is physically sitting, at home versus when they used to be on the trusted internal network sitting in the office building. And so, in addition to introducing these security issues into the corporate environment, movement to VPNs in large volume can obviously result in severe network and performance issues.
Hey,
So now
Chris. Sorry,
yeah, oh, sorry,
Chris.
I meant to check in. Theo, do we have any questions?
We actually have our first question.
Perfect.
Thanks to Posse. The question here is in reference to your always on VPN connection comment. Do you consider cloud-based applications and environments such as Office 365 inherently more secure and not needing another layer of security? For example, access only from whitelisted IPs as one security control.
That's a great question, and yes. Do I consider them more secure? No, I don't. I don't want to say I consider them more secure. I think at the core of every single application, especially with the cloud, the security falls back on the identity and authenticating the identity and using multiple layers. Is it easier to authenticate potentially the identity without so many middle pieces? Using cloud tools, absolutely. Are they more secure? Do we need to bring up the Capital One incident and the breach as a result of a backdoor? So I think each one poses their own security risks and security considerations. But I think when you focus on how can I secure each one of those pieces individually rather than a large blanket security layer, we've seen by some of the US Gartner surveys and everything else that we're seeing security being implemented in distributed systems, and Gartner is saying that's okay. You don't need one security tool or one security software suite that will protect your entire enterprise. If you're using cloud, using a cloud security suite to protect your cloud services is okay, and using a separate one for your corporate network, on-prem type deal is okay, keeping those two separate. So we are seeing that adoption, and hopefully that answers your question. But at the core of it, I've talked about this in coffee talks and other different venues, if you will. It all boils down to that identity. Obviously, making sure that connection is secure, going back and forth, and communication is. But the key is making sure that that identity is protected, authenticated, and again, maybe we're kind of taking a sidestep. One of the things that we talked about that I believe you're going to see a lot of forward movement and development in is adaptive learning as it relates to identity and authentication. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. So, for instance, an example of that would be if you're sitting at home and you connect into your web application or the cloud or some type of application in the cloud, and it detects you sitting at home and you're logging in, and that's your normal behavior. And now all of a sudden it detects you, hey, you decided to go down the street and work from Starbucks. This is not normal. Guess what? I'm going to now, require some form of dual authentication, step-up authentication. I'm going to send you a security code. Vice versa might be true. Maybe you get a login from overseas, Malaysia, Singapore, something like that. Cybersecurity criminal, might think it has you. It detects that this is not a typical behavior of where you log in from. Now you're going to get prompted for that adaptive authentication. I think we're going to see huge push in the adaptive authentication piece. So that's one of my predictions. We're starting to see companies kind of mature that now. So a great question though, like that. Theo, anything else?
No, that's the one for the moment. So
Perfect.
back on
Okay.
track.
So now we get to jump back in to cyber hygiene. This is probably the one that everybody knows about, but it's the elephant in the room, or the monster in the closet, right? Cyber hygiene. And when we talk about the third aspect of working remotely, this is it. This is the cyber hygiene, password management. We all know that passwords that aren't managed properly or controlled represent a significant security risk for every organization. Once again, users have too many passwords to remember, right? And as a result, employees often, what do? They'll share them, they'll reuse them, they'll store passwords insecurely. Maybe it's in a notepad on their desktop. And obviously, we know that these habits create significant threats and leave your systems vulnerable for attacks. And ideally, we talk about, do your employees have trouble remembering passwords? Of course they do. I know we did a statistic last year that said the average person, this is from Maury, our CISO and CTO at Beyond Trust, the average person has 120 passwords to remember. If we were to take all of the security practices around what we know about passwords, making sure none of them are the same, making sure that they have upper, lower number, maybe they're a passphrase, 120 different ones. Nobody can potentially manage 120 passwords mentally, or without some form of making it easier on them. And we're going to kind of jump into that, some of the behavior things that we do to help remember passwords. But ideally, it's the limitation of the human brain, right? We have so many nowadays trying to remember them. It's kind of like the days when the internet first developed, and having would you rather remember a IP address, or would you rather remember DNS, and the adoption of DNS, right? So now you just and now we just search for everything. So now we use search. So ideally, when we relate that back to passwords, we have problems remembering passwords. We all do. I'm guilty of it myself. Writing passwords down on a piece of paper, maybe we're choosing simpler passwords. They're easier to crack by the cybersecurity adversaries. And, what about reusing old passwords? How many times, and I'm guilty of it, right? How many times do we take a password that we just used and we add a 1 to the end? Maybe we got to change it every 30 days. So we add a 1 for the month of January, a 2 for the month of February, instead of making a brand new one. Look, we're all guilty of it. But the idea that cybersecurity criminals, they prey on this. They know this. They know that it's harder for us to use and remember new passwords on a regular basis. So when we tie that back to the considerations for remote access solution or a remote access solution, integration with some type of password safe is another key factor that helps ease some of that, on the end user as a result. And so ideally, now we kind of want to shift gears a bit and ask you this. How is your service desk handling the influx of tickets to, let's say, install or update applications, as well as, let's say, add devices like printers? Um, have you given, let's say, full admin rights to your remote workforce to help alleviate some of, the overload of the help desk? Um, for most organizations, the answer to this question is yes and yes. The abrupt large-scale shift to, working remotely has not only disrupted the normal end-user workflows and processes, but it's also wreaked havoc on security policies and processes. Many organizations essentially are inadequately prepared to support all of these now workers working, telecommuting, working remotely. But business and the continuity and the revenue generation for these organizations, require them to embrace it. They in order for us to work and in order for us to continue, working, we have to embrace everyone working remotely. And so our remote workers, they rely on the service desk to do more than typically let's say, what they used to do. And that is the problem, right? In that's the problem. If they feel they're not getting support from their IT team, what are they going to do? What do we all do? It's human instinct. We want to solve our own problems rather than letting someone else solve them for us, right? And ideally, they'll try to find tools or applications themselves that are going to help them solve their problems, which now creates an even bigger security risk for the company. And when you couple that with maybe giving them some more admin rights to help alleviate, it's just a bad recipe. And so here's another question for you. How can you prevent these users from introducing the malware and the ransomware into your environment? So we're going to answer that question when we dive into the winning recipe, right? What's the recipe that covers all the issues we've discussed? Ideally, 1, protect the remote access. 2, protect the privileged credentials. And then 3, protect the endpoints and enable more granular control over your application. When we talk about each 3 of these, we're actually going to dive into each one individually. So first, you need a solution that securely enables your remote workers. The best way to enable these users, maybe it's third-party vendors, maybe it's employees working on their own laptops. Ideally, you want to use a secured privilege remote access tool. This will help reduce that strain on your overall VPN and ideally increase performance. As I mentioned before, an effective remote support tool directly impacts the success of your employees, having to work remotely. So your solution obviously needs to scale and it needs to adapt to meet, all of their security requirements while driving that productivity. And again, a remote support solution must enable secure and reliable remote support for your employees, both on the network and off the network. Maybe you want to see their screen, maybe you need to chat, maybe you need to elevate privileges, maybe you need to access their mobile device and use their camera so they can help you, the help desk, troubleshoot something. And they need, and doing it securely. This is what we're talking about that, remote support solution, right? And so ideally the remote support solution strategy should, be built to make an entire service desk work better, cover the broadest range of remote support use cases while delivering the most robust, security available, right? We cannot forget about the security. And then, one of the great things is, maybe there's security requirements, maybe there's regulatory compliance. So when we talk about that, we can talk about, the FIPS 140-2. Maybe it's level 2. There's 4 different levels. I have a whole nother slide dedicated to just FIPS 140. And then obviously we need to be able to support multiple operating systems, Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, Android, network devices, all with the exact same tool. This is actually my FIPS 140 slide. I believe that's sharing. I normally hide that, but there's a whole thing on FIPS 140. So the next piece is you can't forget about protecting the credentials. I mean, we talked about it, and obviously working remotely is no different. Two main points that I have here: the ideal, let's say privilege access management strategy, right, is to combine the passwords with session management, discovering all of them, managing all of them, and then auditing, for the activity of them. When were they used? Who were they used by? Are they being used internally? Are they being used by third-party users, right? Maybe your vendors. Maybe you're giving vendors a set of credentials to use. Are they using them on-prem? Or are they using them in the cloud? Ideally, we tend to forget about these privileged credentials when we integrate them, who's using them, what they're using them for. We just know that, hey, they're secured, and we know that in order for somebody to get them, they got to use a PAM solution to get there. But nobody's going back and reviewing it. We didn't talk about it, but I want to say that the number of insider threats as a result is some huge number. And so who's going back and reviewing that data? Was the access appropriate? Did they do what they were supposed to do, or were they doing something malicious? Even though you have security measures in place, such as, hey, you need to go check out this password, who's reviewing that data, right? And so ideally, we talk about protecting the privileged user, the accounts, the applications, the SSH keys, the cloud admin accounts, you name it. There's so many different identities, privileged identities out there. We need to make sure that we're securing all of them. And then the last piece, right? With the increase of these cybersecurity attacks against the remote workers, it's imperative for organizations to secure the end user machines, prevent the malware and ransomware from being introduced to your company's organization. So this is where we said, we're going to answer that question, right? So the first one is reduce the burden on the service desk team by enforcing the least privilege across all desktops, all servers, enabling the exact level of privileged access the end user needs, preventing that malware, that ransomware from being introduced into your corporate network. This empowers essentially users to perform their day-to-day activities, such as installing or maybe updating approved applications, printers, cameras, without giving them full admin rights and without overwhelming your service desk because you've locked them down so much. Now, in order for them to do everything, they're constantly, having to call and make, service desk tickets. A second piece is improve the operational efficiency and security by eliminating the unnecessary privileges and elevation for rights for Windows and Mac users without hindering that productivity. Finding that right combination of privilege management, application control to make that removal of admin rights simple, but yet we're continuing to ensure that we're meeting compliance, we're meeting security, and operational efficiency is maintained. The third piece is, preventing the attacks that are missed by, let's say, antivirus software by removing the admin rights, implementing that least privilege, enabling that privilege elevation, and securing apps with a total application protection. And then last but not least, who doesn't like the ROI piece of it, right? The idea behind the endpoint privilege management is the fast deployment. The ideal endpoint privilege management strategy should enable that fast implementation, policies across all users and all groups, and the ability to be flexible across. So whether it's a developer that needs to work or whether that's an HR person, having those built-in templates that allows you to easily disperse that out across all levels of your organization is something everybody wants, that quick ROI. So with that being said, this is our company. I love this slide. This is our company on a slide. What our company represents, what we refer to these is the three primary pillars of PAM. And when we talk about Beyond Trust and the privileged access management solution and giving you that perfect, winning recipe and enabling your secure remote workforce, ideally our solutions are available in multiple deployment options, whether it's a virtual appliance, on-prem appliance, SaaS. Ideally, all of these pieces, maybe not the on-prem, because we all know how long it takes to get on-prem, but ideally most of them can be up and running very quickly, right? When we talk about no desktop agents to download, for the remote access solution, users can log into a web console from essentially any browser. For our endpoint privilege management, agents are quickly deployed to the endpoint. Policies can get enforced without interruption of users. And then, your users can quickly and securely access the remote access solution running any platform. When we talk about that, maybe you have users on Mac, maybe you have users on Windows. They can be located anywhere, and then they can leverage the integrated password vault to discover and maybe onboard and manage the privileged credentials that are being used in your organization. So, ideally, in addition, our solution, can help you to stop those, users from downloading the malicious software, opening dangerous, phishing attachments that could lead to, obviously, a cybersecurity compromise, your organization. Ideally, we want to do all this. We want to reduce the influx to the service desk tickets while continuing to meet all of those regulatory and compliance needs. And so this essentially is our approach, the privileged access management approach to the frictionless user experience while enabling the right level of rights to access, and we've taken this and we've coined the phrase universal privilege management. And so the idea behind it is to basically secure every privilege across every asset every time. And so this is our company essentially on a slide. And so with that being said, that kind of wraps up. We have an entire white paper dedicated to the remote workforce. And so for those of you that maybe want to read more about it, what are some of the effects in our white paper, you can head over to beyondtrust.com/remote-workers. It's free. You shouldn't have to register, I don't think, for anything. And that's basically it. Like I said, we can spend a ton of time, talking and going through various aspects of what COVID has caused as a result of security implications for organizations. But this is essentially is the meat and potatoes of what's going on and how it's affecting a lot of our organizations, both current customers and new customers that are being challenged with this. So I want to say thank you for CDW and giving us this opportunity to share this with you. I'm going to kind of turn it back over to Theo, and are there any other questions or any questions that came in, Theo, from our last Q&A?
No, we're good on the questions. I mean, we have a few more minutes, like 2 minutes before the top of the hour. So if anybody has a question, drop it in there right now. You can, but you can also tonight at the event, if you want further questions or discussions tonight, it's going to be a little bit more social. So maybe in a little bit more conversational manner. Feel free to come ask us questions there too. I do have one question, maybe if you just while we wait, if somebody is typing it up, or otherwise we can wrap it up. But sort of in short answer, adopting a privileged access management program. So for companies today that are very much still working with an admin-based credential setup, or with users that has very sprawling permissions and access, what sort of, if you have to just going to boil it down, what sort of the first steps that organizations can do to start heading down that path and prepping themselves for adopting a PAM approach?
Sure, and that's actually a great question, a question that gets asked a lot. Ideally, for most organizations, there's a lot of questions that have to be asked. Are you doing it because of a security mandate? Are you doing it because of, you just want to mature your security posture, or did you fail an audit? Aside from those, ideally, you want to focus on your highest privileged accounts that are out there. Most companies and most organizations are looking at securing your domain admin accounts, your highly sensitive service accounts that are being used to do, highly privileged, processes that within your organization. Once you get those secured, everything else kind of falls in line. But making sure that you provide and you implement the infrastructure to support the growth is the key. A lot of times what we'll see is customers will get almost like a deer in the headlight. They see the shiny object, they want to secure it, but they're not looking a year from now. They're not looking down the road for the bigger picture of, what do we need to secure? So we try to make sure that we, keep it as loose as possible. And we talk about that in another deck. We talk about the privileged access management, the journey. And so ideally, most companies want to start with their highly sensitive accounts first. And that's where, if there's no other security considerations from, failing an audit or anything else that's a driving force, that's where most companies should probably start.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I think be respectful for people in lunch. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Chris, reach out to CDW, reach out to your account execs. I'd love to help you there. Other than that, I really hope that you can all join us tonight. We look forward to seeing you there. And yeah, just thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for joining us. Chris, thank you again to you as well for the fantastic presentation. For the meantime, I hope everybody enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll see you soon.